July 480 BCE. The narrow pass of Thermopylae, Greece. The Spartan warrior did what generations of hoplites had been trained to do. He lifted his shield, tightened his grip on spear and leather-wrapped strap, and laughed as the Persian archers drew back their bows. Arrows, boys' weapons, cowards' weapons, real men fought face to face, shield to shield, blade against blade. Then the sky darkened. What had been the subject of Spartan jokes, those distant Persian archers with their recurved bows, became a storm of iron-tipped death. Arrows hissed down in such numbers that one veteran later claimed the sun itself disappeared. The Spartans had joked that they would simply fight in the shade. Now they discovered what it meant to stand in that shade for hours, then days, at a place called Thermopylae. The world remembers Thermopylae as a story of 300 Spartans making a heroic last stand. What is less remembered is what they stood against, not just Persian infantry and cavalry, but the massed power of archery that had helped build an empire stretching from the Aegean to the Indus. For generations, Spartan warriors mocked the July 480 BCE. The narrow pass of Thermopylae, Greece. The Spartan warrior did what generations of hoplites had been trained to do. He lifted his shield, tightened his grip on spear and leather-wrapped strap, and laughed as the Persian archers drew back their bows. Arrows, boys' weapons, cowards' weapons, real men fought face to face, shield to shield, blade against blade. Then the sky darkened. What had been the subject of Spartan jokes, those distant Persian archers with their recurved bows, became a storm of iron-tipped death. Arrows hissed down in such numbers that one veteran later claimed the sun itself disappeared. The Spartans had joked that they would simply fight in the shade. Now they discovered what it meant to stand in that shade for hours, then days, at a place called Thermopylae. The world remembers Thermopylae as a story of 300 Spartans making a heroic last stand. What is less remembered is what they stood against, not just Persian infantry and cavalry, but the massed power of archery that had helped build an empire stretching from the Aegean to the Indus. For generations, Spartan warriors mocked the Persian archers. At Thermopylae, they learned what was waiting behind those bows. Long before the first Persian arrow arced toward Greek shields, the two cultures had already judged one another. To the Spartans, warfare was a matter of bronze and iron pressed together at arm's length. From the age of 7, Spartan boys were taken from their families and thrust into the agoge, a brutal state-run school where pain was a teacher and failure a crime. They learned to march in step, to lock their shields into a seamless wall, and to thrust the heavy dory spear into an enemy's throat or groin. The ideal Spartan did not throw javelins from afar or loose arrows from safety. He closed the distance and killed you while looking into your eyes. Persian warfare looked very different. From the high plains of Iran to the forests of Anatolia, the kings of the Achaemenid Empire built their power on mobility and missiles. Their composite bows, made of wood, horn, and sinew, sent arrows farther and with more force than any simple Greek bow. Their armies were a mosaic of peoples, Medes in scale armor, archers from Asia Minor, horsemen from Bactria, javelin throwers from Africa and India. For the Persians, archery was not a dishonorable shortcut. It was the core of imperial warfare. Each side looked at the other and saw weakness. The Persians saw heavy infantry locked into rigid formation, unable to react to rapid maneuvers and flanking fire. The Spartans saw colorful foreigners hiding behind arrows and cavalry, rather than standing firm in close combat. These prejudices would collide in a narrow Greek pass where there was barely room for a chariot, let alone an empire. The road to Thermopylae began with a bridge. In 480 BCE, King Xerxes I of Persia ordered engineers to lash together hundreds of ships across the Hellespont, the strait separating Asia from Europe. From one continent to another, soldiers could now march as if crossing a massive wooden causeway. Behind them came supply trains, siege equipment, and crucially, tens of thousands of Persian archers whose arrows had conquered kingdoms from Babylon to Lydia. The numbers given by ancient authors are almost certainly exaggerated. Herodotus, the Greek historian, claimed Xerxes had over 1 million men. Modern historians estimate a far smaller but still terrifying force, perhaps 100,000 to 200,000 soldiers, tens of thousands of them archers. Against this, the Greek city-states could field only a fraction, divided by rivalry and mistrust. Sparta, the preeminent military power in Greece, could not ignore the threat. Yet even as the Persian host advanced, Sparta's leaders hesitated. Religious festivals, political caution, and the fear of leaving their own homeland exposed limited how many Spartan warriors could be sent north. In the end, just 300 Spartan hoplites marched with King Leonidas. They were not a random 300. Each was a father with a living son, chosen so that no bloodline would vanish if they fell. Alongside them came several thousand allies, Thespians, Thebans, Phocians, and others, forming a small coalition determined to hold the narrow pass of Thermopylae long enough for the rest of Greece to mobilize. The choice of battlefield was no accident. Thermopylae, the Hot Gates, was a place where mountains squeezed the coastal road into a thin ribbon of land between cliffs and sea. Here, the vast Persian army could not fully deploy its cavalry or surround its enemies with waves of archers. Here, a few thousand Greek hoplites might withstand a storm that would otherwise wash away all resistance. At least, that was the plan. When Spartan warriors first heard of the Persian archers, they mocked them with typical bluntness. Greek culture, especially Spartan culture, despised missile weapons. To stand far away and shoot was, in their eyes, a kind of cowardice. The hoplite ideal was to meet your enemy face to face, your shield pushing into his, your spear finding its mark through skill and courage rather than distance and technique. Herodotus preserves one anecdote that captures this attitude perfectly. A Greek from another city warned a Spartan named Xerxes that Persian archers were so numerous their arrows would block out the sun. Xerxes supposedly smiled and replied, "Excellent, then we shall fight in the shade." It was the sort of line that sounded good over wine in a smoky Spartan barracks. At Thermopylae, it would be tested under a rain of actual arrows. The first encounters at the Hot Gates went just as the Spartan warriors expected, and feared the Persian archers did not. On the opening day of battle, Persian infantry advanced down the narrow coastal road, their shields painted, their spears shorter than those of the Greeks' archers loosed volleys from behind, but with the pass compressed and the sides locked in a pushing match. Many arrows struck shields or their own men. As the two lines collided, the Spartan and allied hoplites drove forward in disciplined formation. Behind their large aspis shields, the Greek warriors advanced as a single unit, their longer spears stabbing over the shield rim. Persian soldiers were forced back, their individual courage no match for the mechanical precision of the hoplite phalanx. The bodies of the first attackers piled high on the rocky ground. More Persians stepped forward and died. The Spartans rotated the men in the front ranks, ensuring that fatigue never robbed them of strength. It was what they had trained for since childhood. Watching this carnage, many Spartan warriors must have felt their contempt for Persian archers deepen. When volleys did fall upon them, the tight shields and bronze armor deflected most arrows. The narrow terrain limited the angles from which Persian archers could fire. At close range, the composite bow's advantage shrank, and the Spartan warriors, mocking the archers in their minds, pressed their attack. Xerxes responded by sending in his elite immortals, the best infantry in the Persian Empire, many of them supported by specialist archers. Once again, the pass did its work. The Immortals could not surround the Greeks. Their coordination with the archers broke down in the chaos of the narrow front. Spartan spears punched through the ornate armor of the Imperial Guard, and the men of Xerxes were hurled back. For 2 days, the pattern repeated. Persian commanders relied on their archers and light infantry to soften the Spartans before another attack. Spartan warriors joked grimly about fighting in the shade, their confidence reinforced by every repelled assault. They still believed that Persian archers were tools of intimidation, not decisive instruments of battle. They had not yet met what was waiting for them above the pass. High in the hills overlooking Thermopylae, a different battle was unfolding. Among the peoples forced into Xerxes' host was a local Greek named Ephialtes. He knew that Thermopylae's main road was not the only way through the mountains. A narrow path, the Anopia, wound through the hills and emerged behind the Greek position. Leonidas had stationed a small contingent of Phocians there to guard it, but their numbers were limited and their equipment inferior to Spartan heavy infantry. Ephialtes, tempted by reward or terrified of Persian power, revealed this path to Xerxes. Under cover of darkness, a picked force of Persian infantry and archers began climbing the hidden route. While Spartan warriors down in the pass mocked the visible Persian archers facing them, thousands more were quietly ascending above, bows unstrung for the climb, spears and swords carried close. The next morning, the Phocian defenders were surprised by the appearance of these troops. Persian archers loosed into their ranks, and the outnumbered Greeks fell back in confusion. The way behind Leonidas was now open. It wasn't brute force that had undone the Spartans' position. It was information and maneuver. Elements of warfare the Persians, with their emphasis on flexibility and missiles, understood well. Thermopylae was about to turn from a straightforward frontal defense into a trap closing from 2 directions. Leonidas soon learned what had happened. Scouts and local allies brought word of the Persian flanking force. The Spartan king realized the pass would be encircled by nightfall. He had a choice: withdraw and preserve his men for another battle, or remain and buy more time at the cost of certain death. He chose to stay. Most of the allied contingents were dismissed, ordered to retreat, and live to fight again. Leonidas kept with him his 300 Spartan warriors, a group of Thespians who volunteered to remain, and a reluctant contingent of Thebans compelled to stay as hostages. These men would face what the Persians and their archers had prepared. Now, the role of Persian archers changed dramatically. With the path through the hills open, Xerxes no longer needed to force the pass by frontal assault alone. He could attack from both sides, saturate the confined space with missiles, and let the weight of numbers and constant volleys wear down the defenders. The myth of arrows blotting out the sun turned into a deadly tactical reality. As the final day of battle began, Persian infantry advanced once more, their archers loosing in dense waves before and between the charges. The Spartans and their companions surged forward, pushing the enemy back from the narrowest point of the pass to a wider area near a hillock and a lion monument that would later mark the spot of Leonidas's stand. Here, with less constricting terrain, Persian archers finally achieved what they had been trained to do. From the slopes and from the flanks, they could fire into the side and rear of the Greek formation shields that had once formed an impenetrable wall, now left gaps under, over, and behind. Each step the Spartans took to push back the infantry brought them closer to arcs of fire from archers positioned on higher ground. The Spartan warriors still mocked the Persian archers with their voices, but their bodies told a different story. Shields grew heavier, as arrowheads lodged in bronze and wood limbs began to bleed through gaps in armor. Some Spartans snapped shafts and kept fighting, others fell where they stood. For every spear thrust that found a Persian chest, another arrow found flesh behind a shield. Then the encircling force from the Anapaya path arrived. Persian infantry and archers descended from the rear, hemming the Spartans in on all sides. The battlefield shrank around them. Instead of a straight line blocking a road, Leonidas's men found themselves on a small hill, under fire from multiple directions, cut off from escape. This was what had been waiting for them at Thermopylae, not merely Persian archers firing from a single front, but an integrated trap of missiles and infantry closing from every angle. According to Herodotus, the Spartans fought with spears until they broke, then with swords until those were lost, and finally, with hands and teeth, the Persian archers did not stop. Volleys poured in until the last Greek collapsed beneath a forest of arrows and spears. The mocked archers had become the instrument of final annihilation. Thermopylae ended in Greek defeat, yet the story did not end with the deaths of Leonidas and his men. News of their stand spread across Greece. In Athens, leaders used the sacrifice at the hot gates to rally citizens for the naval battle that would follow at Salamis across the Greek world. The idea of Spartan warriors holding a vast empire at bay captured imaginations and hardened resistance. The Persian archers had won the ground at Thermopylae, but the Spartans had seized something more enduring: the narrative. Behind the legend, however, lies a set of hard facts and figures, ancient equivalents to the statistics of modern air combat. 3 days of fighting, perhaps 7,000 Greeks at the start, dwindling to a fraction by the end. A Persian force that, even by conservative modern estimates, outnumbered them many times over. Casualty numbers are uncertain, but ancient sources suggest thousands of Persians fell in front of the Greek phalanx during the first 2 days alone. The Spartans and their allies, on the other hand, were nearly annihilated on the final day. Many likely killed not by swords at arm's length, but by volleys of arrows raining into their compressed ranks. The mathematics of Thermopylae, like the statistics of bomber escort missions in another war 2 millennia later, told a story that ideology did not want to hear. Heavy infantry alone could not dominate every battlefield. The Spartan disdain for missile troops, their habit of mocking Persian archers as lesser warriors, blinded them to how archery, maneuver, and terrain could combine to defeat even the most disciplined hoplite formation. Yet Thermopylae was not simply a story of Spartan arrogance and Persian archery. It was also a clash of two different visions of war. For Sparta, courage meant standing firm in a narrow place, shoulder to shoulder, refusing to retreat. For Persia, power meant flexibility, using archers, cavalry, and information to shape the battlefield before the main clash even began. At Thermopylae, the Spartans forced the Persians to pay a terrible price for every step forward. For 2 days, They demonstrated the terrifying efficiency of disciplined heavy infantry in close terrain. But when information and maneuver